Good morning and welcome to this morning's executive. First of all, do we have any apologies?
No, convener, no apologies have been submitted.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest, financial or non-financial? Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, convener. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 9, community choices. I'm chairman of the Baseford War Memorial Association, and we've already submitted a bid, and we might be submitting another bid, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to take part in that debate, so I'll step out of that debate.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Bissett, and Mr Frawley will note that and put you into the lobby for that particular item. If there are no other declarations, we'll move into...
Convener, it's Councillor Gardner. Like Councillor Bissett, I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 9 as I'm a member of Dunnipace FC committee, and they are possibly putting a bid in as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Gardner. No other declarations? Okay, thank you. Move on to the minute of the meeting of the executive held on the 24th of August. Are we happy to accept that as a true minute?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. And there is also the minute of the special meeting of the executive held on the 14th of September. Similarly, is it agreed as an accurate minute?
Agreed, convener.
Is there any member have anything they wish to raise in relation to the minute that isn't on the agenda? No, thank you. The rolling action log has been updated. Colin, do you want to say anything in particular in relation to that?
No, convener, I think as you've said, it's up to date and is there available for members' questions.
Okay, Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, thanks, convener. I've got a number of points in relation to the action log. The first one's 469. Just a note from the information here that the work's not due to start until next year and continue on into 2023. But we have a report that's coming back to us on the 19th of October this year. I'm just wondering what is going to be reported on if the work hasn't actually started.
I think the work is underway, Councillor Nimmo, but Mr Duff will maybe be able to give a wee bit more information in relation to the report that's coming forward.
Okay.
Happy to do that, convener. So the report gives an update on the delivery of the first plan that was prepared. The proposals for 22-23 are for the second plan that's underway in preparation, but the report will also give an update on the financial position supporting the delivery of these plans, so that the approach to their preparation and delivery can be made clear for the executive.
Okay, thanks, Douglas. My next point is in relation to 549. I'm just wondering if there's any indication as to when the Firework Review Working Group's recommendations will be published by the Scottish Government. I mean, it's obviously not a priority for this year, but I'm just looking for some further information in relation to this one.
You, convener, we are expecting it prior to the end of the calendar year, but no more details than that.
Okay, thanks for that. And the next one's 568. I'm just looking to find out if there's any indication as to when the UK government will decide on the funding submissions.
Again, convener, no details on a decision from the UK government.
Right, and my last one, convener, is 571. I'm still waiting on a decision regarding the blocks of flats to be used in the pilot that was previously agreed. I think that the pilot should cover the whole of the summer months, because obviously that's going to give us a true picture in relation to the growing season and how the blocks of flats and the surrounding areas are going to be affected.
Okay, I'll go to Mr Ritchie.
Yeah, thanks, convener. There was an email went out to members at the tail end of last week, just identifying the 3 blocks of flats that are going to be part of the trial. If Councillor Nimmo didn't get that, I'm happy to send another copy of that email on to him. But just to confirm that the 3 blocks of flats have been identified, and the next step for us is just a bit of consultation with the tenants in each of the flats, and then we'll come back to the local members.
Thanks for that update, Stuart. I certainly haven't received anything. If that could be forwarded on to me, I'd be grateful. Can you maybe speak about the issue regarding the growing season, because we want to get a true picture as to what we're actually dealing with round about these blocks of flats?
Yeah, thanks. Again, through you, convener, we've still to agree what the specification is going to be for the pilot and the time period of the pilot. But I think that we are aware of the fact that to get a meaningful pilot scheme, it needs to be something which has got a bit of length to it in terms of its longevity, but also a bit to it in terms of the specification of what it is that we actually do. So following on the discussions that we have with the tenants I've just referred to, we're going to come back to elected members so that they're part of the discussions before the pilot actually starts as to what we're going to do and how long we're going to do it for.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Black.
Yeah, I was just to really back up what Alan was saying. I think that, I mean, for myself, going round parts of Grangemouth in the summer, you know, that was when the weeds and everything else was at their worst. And I just think that if we finish the pilot in the early summer, we're not going to actually see what the, you know, what the reality of the situation is. So I think we need to make sure that it lasts till the autumn, really, because that's when things start to slow down and stop growing.
Okay, Stuart, you can perhaps feed that back into the system when this for the specification to be developed. Okay, any other member in relation to the rolling action log? No, thank you. We move into decisions taken under delegated powers. This is for information, and I think it's Mr. Moody that's going to take this.
Yes, thank you, convener. And this is a very brief report, which is presented following the summer recess, which gives information to note on any decision taken under recess powers. And there's one decision which is appended to the report, which relates to the approval to participate in the locally engaged staff scheme in relation to people from Afghanistan.
Okay, thank you for that, Colin. And it's really just for information for people here. We content just to agree on the decisions taken under delegated powers?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, thank you, colleagues. If we can move on to the referrals from the committee. The first referral is from the Audit Committee of the Corporate Risk Management update, and I think it's Mr. Smale.
Yes, convener, thank you, and good morning. This is the first of 2 referrals on from the Audit Committee. The first one is a regular report that goes to that committee and embraces the risk register, the risk dashboard and the risk management improvement plan. It will be evident to members looking at the report itself that's attached, the original report. There's quite a lot of detail in the appendices. I'm not proposing to go through the report, convener, but if members have any questions or points they wish to clarify, I'm happy to try and address them. And in the cover report, you can see the recommendation at 2.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smale. Obviously, that this is a kind of reflective look in some ways, and will have to be updated following the various decisions that council make, particularly the implications of decisions of council last week and how that sits with our risk register and our improvement plan going forward. So while this is a reflective look, it probably will have to come back to council in the near future to be reviewed following the updates from the audit committee. But in which case I'm happy to accept the recommendations and move the report. And I think Councillor Bowes is going to second.
Thank you, Convener. I'm obviously content to second. As I say, a week is a long time in politics, and as I'm happy to second this. I have to say that this register of risks has to be reviewed and a number of risks changed to high or extremely high. I would pick out at least 3 of the risks identified in this report, which all tie into the regressive decision made last week on the regeneration of Falkirk's High Street. However, I shall focus on one, and its investments failure to deliver on major developments and capital programmes. Could I politely suggest that there is description, there is a significant risk of pressure on our high street to further digress. The consequences, business closures, loss of jobs, loss of investment from private and governmental sources, harm to the people and local economy, poverty and inequality in most deprived areas and groups will be impacted by the loss of jobs here. In regards to mitigation, elected members respect and take cognizance of officers and renowned special advisors' recommendations, and elected members act in the interests of the people of Falkirk rather than their own party political interests. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Councillor Black.
Thanks. I actually found Councillor Bowes' comments just now offensive because the Labour group put forward their amendment because they felt it was the best interest of the people of Falkirk district. However, to go back to the role and action, to the audit risk register, which we're supposed to be talking about just now, and for me, one of the biggest, highest risks is the risk to our unpaid carers, because currently there is a crisis in care. We've got a huge shortage of care staff, and all our services are under extreme pressure. And I think that isn't reflected in the risk register. I'm just thinking about, for example, in our daycare services, which a lot of carers rely on and the service users love, obviously because of the pandemic, etc. It's running at reduced capacity. But at the same time, our unpaid carers are getting ever more stretched. But our daycare staff are actually having to work in home care and care at home. So I know the reasons for that. We all know the reasons for that. There's a national shortage of carers, and there's all sorts of things going on to try and resolve this. But at the same time, it is a huge risk, and I don't think that's reflected in the risk register.
Thank you, Councillor Black. We don't have Patricia with us today, but I do know that is actually contained within the IGIB's risk register, and it is very well documented within that. So I don't think it is being missed. I think that's something that we're all very acutely aware of, and where we can affect it, we will look to affect it in a positive way. But it is very much on the radar, and it is in the appropriate place within the IGIB. Okay, I've got Councillor Bissett.
I'd just like to say I also found Councillor Bowes' statement a bit offensive, really, because it's his group's opinion that it was a regressive decision, but 17 out of 29 councillors thought it wasn't. So that's democracy for you. And the decision to build on that site, we don't think will have a detrimental effect on the high street. So that's Councillor Bowes' opinion. He's certainly entitled to that. But I'm not sure this is the forum to actually mention it. Thank you.
And I would similarly say to your own comments in relation to that, Councillor Bissett, because at the moment we're talking about the risk register, and indeed the decision taken by council does have an impact on our risk register, and that needs to be reflected. I've got Councillor Munro and Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Convener. One of the things that is made clear in this risk register is the fact that we have little funding and we face a very difficult 2 years. And on that basis, the decisions that we make need to be cognizant of that. And we need reports that give us full facts and details on which to base those, rather than what we had last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. We're stemming into a debate rerunning within Council, but I do have to defend the report. So there's been a huge amount of information contained within every report that's been brought forward on that particular item, and by not wanting to take a decision in the best interest of the Council, it creates a risk to us. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, I would say that a risk is created when groups come together in an alliance in order to ignore the advice of officers, or the advice of civil servants in Edinburgh, civil servants in London, and ignore all of the advice that they've received from the town centre community. Of course, that's a major risk. And of course, we should be wary of that particular risk. And I think the Labour councillors who have spoken this morning have been disingenuous in the extreme to criticise Councillor Biggs, who spoke nothing but the truth. But the truth hurts sometimes, doesn't it, lads and lassies?
In 91 can be up.
You weren't named, Mr. Councillor Bissett?
Yes, but the Labour group was mentioned.
Okay, we'll hear you 19-1.
Thanks, Convener. Certainly, Councillor Alexander mentions an alliance. There is no alliance. The Labour group put forward a position, and that's simply it. If it gets support from the SNP group or the Conservative group, fine. But we just put forward a position. So I'd just like to clarify that, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, well, we saw how the vote went. Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. After your comment in private, we seem to have degenerated somewhat, and the tone was absolutely set by Councillor Bowse's comments and use of emotive words about facts and democracy. The risk register is what we're talking about here, but I can tie quite nicely the comments that I was going to make about one of the risks on here that is down as low, the community trust, the reintegration project. I also found it quite interesting that one of the other comments that was made was when groups work together or collaborate with other groups against what seems to be officers' recommendations. The report on the trust showed quite clearly that there was no financial gain. In fact, there was a detriment to £1 million year on year ad infinitum for taking the trust back into council properties. So if we're talking about groups working together collaboratively for the betterment of the people of Falkirk, I would love to hear how that risk, who's now in here as low, can be explained. Now, I'm looking for a political argument. We've done that, and I lost the political argument because, as we've said, the numbers count and it's not democracy to go back to that. However, I still wonder why that's in there as a low risk when it's absolutely factually, financially correct to say that £1 million out of our taxpayers' money will be taken out of services to pay for the rates on buildings that will be run by the council and not the trust. So can somebody tell me why that was designated as a low risk? When we've actually got an email here this morning from the Chief Executive saying that the terms and conditions of transferring the staff is protected as part of this transition, and consideration is given to the way in which the trust staff will work. A lot of work is involved in this process, and that cannot be underestimated. I won't even go into boring people about the legal implications as well as the financial ones and the emotional ones and the stress that the trust staff are going through right now. But I don't understand, given this email that we received yesterday, how this is a low risk.
Okay, Kenneth, do you want to take that?
Yes, thank you. I mean, in terms of the risk scoring, that's a measure of the fact that, albeit it is a challenging process, as Councillor Coombs rightly identifies, that process is going well at the moment. We're working very closely with the Trust. We understand the risks involved. We're endeavouring to manage them as best we can. So the process, in terms of the reintegration, in our judgment, is going well, but that's not to underestimate the challenge of reintegrating the Trust into the Council.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. And the financial risks related with bringing the trust back in can appeal into insignificance in relation to the outcome of Wednesday. But however,
Again, a matter
we
of
will move
opinion.
on.
We're saving money as far as our proposal saved money.
But as you say, we're in rerunning of the debate, so I'm not going to answer that, but I could quite happily discuss that at length should anybody require that to happen. But we have the risk register in front of us. People have had their say on that. It does have to be updated following decisions of council, and I do think it will have to be brought back to members fairly swiftly as a result of that, so that we can look to manage those risks. But if we're in agreement with what's there just now, is a bit of a rear look at things, and we're happy to move on. The accompanying report is a referral from audit on the risk management assurance policy and framework. And again, that's the framework to which we manage our risks, and it was discussed at length at the audit committee, and it was agreed at that time. There was no division, so I'm happy to recommend that to members. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you again, Convener. And again, I'm content to second this report. In doing so, I reviewed the responsibilities of elected members and committees. Some of them I'd like to comment. I'd comment on a few of them as follows. Elected members, risk management must be considered in all aspects of any decision making, and I think that's very, very important. On the executive, I've mentioned this a number of times in the last 4.5 years, that horizon scanning is critical to every decision. And of course, portfolio holders expect to exercise political leadership functions in relation to monitoring, scrutiny and assurance on risk within their remit. I think these are all very important parts in what we do in the assurance policy. And particularly, I would like to thank the Leader of the Council, Councillor Alexander, for their leadership last week, and ask that the members of the opposition strongly consider risks of last week's decision at full council and regeneration of the High Street, as the horizon for our High Street is looking particularly dim at this present time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowes. I've got Councillor Coombs and then Councillor Nimmo.
Just a very quick comment on the page 64, and it says that the responsibilities of elected members and committees, and at least 3 times on that page, it says that it's the job of elected members to challenge officers, to ensure risks are considered and recorded in reports, and to challenge officers on the effectiveness of controls and governance arrangements. So I think that we're just quite clearly stating that it is our job to challenge officers, and as an opposition, we have the right to make decisions for our own residents, for what we see the best for them to be. And if this continues, with Councillor Bowes mentioning every single item, referring back to last week, the High Street is not the only consideration that I have when I'm making decisions. There are other people who have other needs and wants with regard to the finances that we spend on their behalf. Thanks, Convener.
19-1, Convener.
Okay, I don't want this to turn into...
Whoever's on the phone, somebody keeps, there's a phone, I don't know what that's, the noise is kind of disturbing.
Councillor Kerr has joined us by telephone today, and I think he's maybe taken another call and placed us on hold. I'm not sure if there's anything we can do about that, and I appreciate that that's a difficulty, but we'll see what we can do to sort that out. Okay, Councillor Bice, we'll hear you 19.1.
It's fine, convener. You're right. I don't want it to go into too much on this, and I just stand by the statement I've made.
Thank you. What I will say is that we have professional officers that provide the best advice to members, and that there's the method of challenge has it sometimes been dubious in the way it's been done, but the officers work for the whole council, not just for any political grouping, and we need to remember that they are not doing this without the best interests of Falkirk and their proposals coming forward. And I just think we just need to be careful about how that is taken, because at the moment there is a particular view from officers that they are not, their views are not being heard, and the advice is not being taken by members. Councillor Nimmo.
Just a quick point, convener. I'm looking for an explanation from officers regarding the climate change. That's only listed as a medium risk. Now, obviously, it's a high-profile issue, and I'm just wondering why it's only medium.
Okay, I don't know whether Mr. Duff would be able to feedback on that, or to whether Kenneth, you would want to take that one.
I'm happy to come in on it, Cecil. I mean,
Thanks, Douglas.
It's based on the fact that we have an action plan underway. We took a report to the executive in June with an initial action plan setting out the measures that the council's getting underway, and there's a fuller report expected later in the year or early part of new year on the full measures that are taking place. And I mean, clearly climate change is a global issue, and there are inevitably, real concerns about that. But importantly, from the perspective of the council and the measures it has underway, we do feel that we're active in taking these forward. We have the measures set out appropriately, and therefore feel that the level of risk is manageable for the issues that we have responsibility.
Thanks, Douglas.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. I've got Councillor Alexander and Councillor Garner.
I hear very much what Councillor Nimmo has said, but again, this will have to be reviewed, or the decisions that were taken last week have to be reviewed. Because every decision had a negative impact on our ability to control and reduce our carbon footprint. So, well, I accept that maybe a low risk at the moment, no doubt they become a higher risk in future. In fact, it seems as if the biggest risk of all, it would be if Labour was to take control of the council.
Okay, Councillor Alexander, I don't think there's a response required to that. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, convener. And Councillor Alexander has just come in on the points I was going to make after Councillor Nimmo's question there. And when we do look at what we were going to do and what we thought we were going to do, that is all sort of been put as a higher risk now, given the decisions taken last week. And some councillors sit in certain committees that we're on, and they talk about how climate change is the highest priority, and the council needs to do everything they can. And then a massive decision like this that has been taken, and it's kind of thrown our plans into some form of confusion, shall we say.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. As there's no other questions, we're happy to agree the report.
Agreed.
Okay, move on to our policy areas, and it's Falkirk Business Improvement District Renewal, and I'll go to Mr. Duff.
Thanks, convener. And so this report gives an update on the work that's been undertaken by the Falkirk Business Improvement District, the BID, following a recent renewal ballot that took place in August, and that was on the basis of an agreement that the council had made in June for that ballot to proceed. So we're asking that the executive notes the success of the bid ballot for a fourth term, taking them through to October 2026, and agree that officers should proceed to work in partnership with Falkirk Towns Limited, which is the operating name of the bid company, for the delivery of its business plan over that period. So the background to the report is that the bid is the body responsible for promotion of the interests of the town centre, and works on behalf of the businesses there to enhance and promote the attractiveness of the town centre for its retailers and other businesses. The bid relies on a levy that is received from those businesses based on a proportion of their non-domestic rates, and it was agreed that they should conduct a ballot as to whether it should continue for the next period through to 2026. A ballot was conducted on 27th of August. 329 votes were received out of the 662 commercial properties within the bid area, and as a result of that ballot, 87% were in favour of the initiative. This generates around 160,000 of levy income over the 5-year period of the term, 160,000 per year over that period. There's some further detail on the results of the bid, noting that there was an increase in turnout over the piece, and an increase in the proportion of yes votes, both in terms of the number of businesses and in the proportion of rateable value of the ballot participants. So the bid will now move to push forward with its business plan, and the intention is that council officers will work with them in the delivery of that plan. We do note that the council has agreed some additional financial support to the bid for work in district centres as part of its economic recovery plan, and this will align with the measures being taken forward by the bid, but has a specific focus and benefit for the district centres. We note in the consultation section the main elements of the business plan being to promote the town centre, to maintain its attractiveness and cleanliness, work with partners to ensure it's a safe and vibrant town centre, ensure it meets visitor expectations, identify additional external funding, inspire visitors to come to the town centre day and night, and create an environment for businesses to be informed and to thrive. So we will be working with them in pursuing this. We do offer financial support to the bids on a regular basis, 79,000 in the financial year 21-22, and an additional 30,000 of funds given for safer streets related activities. And so we'll work with them in the delivery of this, and there will be a report coming to the next scrutiny committee following the public pound report that will note some of the activities that the bid has had underway. So good news in that the bid has that agreement for its next term. It will help to progress the interests of the town centre, and we will work positively with them, particularly through our arrangement on the bid board. We'll be able to monitor and report back to scrutiny committee. I'm happy to take any questions, and I would want to recognise the input of Jackie McArthur, who's joined the meeting, who was very much integral to the work in pursuing this reballot. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Is that better? Yep. Okay, thank you, Douglas. We just kind of lost a wee bit at the end here, but I think everybody kind of got the general finish there. But I'll go to Councillor Alexander first.
Thank you, Convener. This is an excellent report. It's a report that's full of irony. Irony being, wonder if the result that the bid have received would have been the same if the decisions had been taken, or if the indication had been given prior to the bid submission, what would happen. We would see the partnership that had been built up between Falkirk Council and the bid destroyed 100% of what happened last week. We don't have to ask too many questions regards to what the bid's view actually is in relation to the decision taken last week. We've seen it in the Falkirk Herald before. We've seen the support that's been there for the joint working that has been prevalent with this administration, and the actions taken against joint working by the opposition. That's a particularly sad situation that we find ourselves in, because we had a genuine partnership, but when one partner is weakened so much because of petty politics, then that means that the whole partnership concept is out the window. It's a shame that, because an awful lot of people with behind the scenes, within the bid itself, within Falkirk Council itself, worked very hard indeed to get us to where we are, to get the support of the wider business community or the programme we had. Programme which, incidentally, will work out much, much less than what was proposed last week by the opposition. None of which was ran past officials, none of which was made available beforehand, so that officers could have an opinion, educated opinion, and therefore the whole concept down the drain. All we can do is start again and try and go over the difficulties that have been there in the past. What I would say is I'm actually very enthused by the actions of the town centre business community. They're very, very clear indication they are most unhappy with the actions of opposition members in Falkirk Council. With that, convener, I formally move recommendations and move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander, and I'm happy to second. I'm just fear that we may end up being very negative. I just want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that the bid have put in, particularly over the last couple of years throughout the pandemic, and the support that's been given to the businesses has been unprecedented, and the work that they have done in conjunction with Falkirk Council in looking at the regeneration of Falkirk Town Centre has been invaluable, as has the views of the traders, the businesses, and the buy-in to working in that town centre partnership. I think that was reflected in the 87% yes vote for the bid coming back, which is one of the highest votes of any bid has got. And I also know that they are feeling very disappointed at the decisions having been taken by the council, and they too feel that their views have been disregarded in all of this final, particularly this final decision. However, I know that they will regroup and they will look to do their absolute utmost for the town centre and support the businesses over the next year or so, and make sure that we can continue to attract people into our town centre as best we possibly can through the events and special events, shopping, seasonal, etc. And was to thank them for their dedication, and I hope that we'll be able to continue to salvage something around the town centre regeneration and continue to work in partnership going forward. So I'm happy to second the report. I've got Councillor Garner and then Councillor Munro.
Thank you, convener. I think my hand was a legacy hand, but maybe I'll come in a wee while.
All right, okay, right. Sorry, Councillor Munro.
Thank you, convener. I'm a big fan of the bid, and being a retailer, that's hardly surprising. And I've had conversations with Elaine and Jackie, and I know what fantastic work they do. One of the things missing from last week's report was the fact that we have more than 40 new businesses in the high street in the last 2 years during the pandemic. Businesses which are local businesses rather than national businesses which have more latterly moved to the retail park. We also have new footfall counters, and those footfall counters tell us that things are getting better. And we have a new market. There are lots of positives for the high street, and we still have a theatre which is about to produce a panto, a theatre that doesn't look to me, having stood there in recent weeks, like it needs knocking down. So how is replacing an existing building 200 yards from the one we already have going to solve all the challenges? The challenges of the high street are many, and we know they're many, and as such we need many solutions, but we need to look forward. And all I've heard from the SNP this morning is negative comments about that, you know, this is the end of the world. Well, it's not. We have to carry on, and we have to support businesses to go forward, and not just the high street. We have to remember that the retail park is thriving. It's buzzing. It has no voice at all. And I think we've been incredibly negative here, and I'm really pleased that the bid is doing well. And I would just like to ask whether smaller areas such as Bowness and the like, who don't actually have the bid but do have some assistance in terms of the gentleman that comes and helps tidy up and things, are going to continue to get support for their high streets, because believe you me, Bowness no longer has a bank, it no longer has a main post office, and we are losing shops. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're kind of straying a bit off the subject, but I'll maybe ask either Jackie or Douglas to come in and maybe speak about the additional funding that was agreed in the budget to support the smaller district centres out with the town centre, because they are not part of the bid.
Thanks, convener. I'll maybe say a bit about that funding, but bring Jackie in as to the activities that the bid has been operating in those district centres on our behalf. It's basically additional money that has been granted through our economic recovery plan. So there was £300,000 last year, 500,000 this year, of which the bid is receiving around 50k. And that helps with the provision of the handyman service and other activities. It is proposed to sustain that next year, allowing for the decision that the council has to reach on its budget next year. And so we would hope to sustain that activity if that's going to be possible. But we do rely on the support and willingness of businesses to engage with this activity, and certainly we're keen to work with businesses in those district centres. But maybe to bring Jackie in on the activities that are underway there.
Hi, morning everyone. Yes, the extra funding has made an enormous difference to the district town centres. So now we have a dedicated handyman working in the town centres across the 4 districts. So he's there at least 1.5 days a week, dealing with all sorts of environmental issues, whether it's fly tipping or fly posting or graffiti, and really just responds to the requests from the businesses We work hand in hand. So if the council has a responsibility in certain areas and we just need a bit of extra input, then we can pull the handyman in to do that. And certainly the response we're getting from businesses is very positive, and they're really seeing a difference in the town centres for that. We also have a dedicated assistant manager working in the district. So we have two. So they have responsibility for 2 district town centres. And at the moment, they are really trying to work with the businesses to improve their digital presence and their engagement with their visitors and customers. We are developing town centre websites, and this is on the back of the council investing on our Wi-Fi infrastructure across the area. So we now have it in Bo'ness, we have it in Denny, we have it in Grangemouth, in our 2 centres in Grangemouth, and Stenhousemuir is just about to go live in the next few weeks. So we want to utilise that investment that we've made and make it work for the businesses and visitors into the town. So there's lots of work going on underway in the district town centre. So if any of the members have, if anything's been brought to their attention, then you know just to contact me and I'll make sure that we address that where we can. Would it be appropriate for me just to come back on Councillor Munro's comments that she made about new businesses in Falkirk Town Centre? Because I really do think it's important to note, yes, we have had new businesses in Falkirk Town Centre, but if you speak to many of these small businesses, they have opened up on the understanding that there would be a regeneration project in the town centre. So clearly this is disappointing news to all of the businesses in Falkirk. As you know, we've lost Marks and Spencer's, Debenhams, Wallace, Dorothy Perkins. We've just lost Oliphants on the High Street. They closed on Friday. So this is disappointing news, obviously, for everyone, including myself. But you're absolutely right. We will push ahead and deliver the business plan, and we'll continue to work on the Falkirk Town Centre Action Plan and do what we can to support everyone. But I just think it was important to say that is definitely the situation with new businesses. The footfall sensors are absolutely right, but we are not anything like the pre-COVID figures, although the numbers are going up consistently. We've recently just put footfall figures in Coburn Street, so that allows us to monitor the footfall from the existing municipal buildings into the town centre, and as we suspected, it is pretty low. So we'll need to be doing what we can to try and increase the footfall into the town centre from that part of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. That was helpful. I've got Councillor Black.
Yeah, it was a fantastic achievement for the bid for Jackie and for Elaine and all her team. And during the first ballot for the bid, I went out and spoke to retailers. And as you know, I was a retailer myself. And I think that the negativity is uncalled for. The decision taken last week was difficult. It definitely was not petty politics. No one envisaged a pandemic, and we don't know the potential repercussions of that as yet. I think there's still so many little things that can be done. And I think that, you know, to improve footfall, I think we have to, sometimes we forget about the little things because we're so concentrated and fixated on doing something big. And I think that we might have to give more financial support to the town centres. But we can, you know, working together, we can get positive results. And I think that what the bid did was fantastic in getting that result. And they've got another few years, I'm sure, working together that we can all do good things. And I just think that we have to be positive and not be negative. And I think there's too much negativity during this executive today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I'll try and be as positive as I can be. I'd like to thank Jackie and Elaine for the work that they do. They're really passionate. I mean, I've spoken to them before, and they're passionate about the High Street, and it's great to see that. And it was great to see the increased vote. I mean, there was a concern that maybe the vote might not be increased or it might not have a majority, but it certainly does have a majority. And it's really good to see that and look forward to working with them in the future. I mean, the HQ and the Art Centre that would have been built would be maybe take 3 or 4 years to build. So we've got to have a plan going forward and how we can keep the high street going over the next few years anyway. So I look forward to working with them. There's been significant investment in the high street, whether it's the town centre heritage plan or street pastors or taxi marshals or whatever, Wi-Fi. There's been a lot of investment, and certainly the bid, I'd like to see the bid sort of doing kind of more work with the other centres, the Bowness and Denny and Larport and Stennismuir. And I'd hope maybe at some point there could be a bid set up out in these areas, but I think there's not enough interest at the minute. But I'd just like to thank them very much for their efforts. And just as a reflection on what was in the Falkirk Herald around the HQ, I would have to say, having trawled through all the comments, it was 70-30 in favour of the decision. So that's the comments. There's about 45,000 readers in the Herald, and these are the comments that got put up. So that's just a reflection. But I didn't really want to go down that road. I just want to thank Jackie, certainly Jackie and Elaine for their efforts, and look forward to working with them in the future. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. Councillor Garner.
Thanks, Convener. I think Councillor Bissett alludes to the Falkirk Herald article there. I think we'll find out on the 14th of October what the people actually do think about the decision taken last week. I was going to come in and ask Jackie to sort of expand on what the businesses actually felt after the decision last week, but she sort of touched on that, and I think she put it across quite clearly, and hopefully elected members were listening to that. But I would like to thank Jackie and the team for not only what they've done in Falkirk Town Centre, but there's an agenda item coming up later on, in agenda item 10, and I know she's been a big part of that. So I'd like to thank Jackie and the team for all the work she's done there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. As adding a little bit to what Paul was saying on thanking Jackie. I find the town centre, where the work that you've done there and the organisation of it, so much better now. It really is. It's great. I've been there the last couple of weekends, and it's been really fantastic. The night we've had, the taxi marshal bit is particularly, I think, is superb as well. I'd maybe like at some point, Jackie, to speak to you maybe about what I know we can't get a bid in the Stennismuir area, but maybe work with the local community, because they might be able to work with you to develop that, and that might be the way to go around that, rather than setting up a bid in the area. But really, genuinely, thank you for all the work that you do.
Okay, thank you. Just final couple of things in this items. We've heard talk about doing some of the little things, that the little things matter, but they're not going to create long-term financial stability for our economy or our town centre, and that needs the bigger things to happen. And members agreed that several years ago now, that we needed to be doing something quite radical, and the pandemic has only just made that far more focused, and they need to do that urgently. Financial support is going to be a real challenge to be able to give without actually doing some of the big stuff, to be able to do that, and indeed giving a bit of certainty to the businesses. The decision on Wednesday's just kicked any town centre regeneration into the long grass, and that's how it will be viewed. And just a comment to Councillor Munro in relation to Falkirk Town Hall. If you actually read the report, read the feedback from the various people that use the current town hall, the various acts that actually have used Falkirk Town Hall previously, you will see exactly why we need to look to move to something that's more fit for purpose and modern, and more a user experience is enhanced in order to be able to increase that footfall. If we continue the way we are, we'll just see it decline further. And again, I've been long enough in the council to know the various iterations that I've gone through around the HQ, and know the challenges that were put in front of members around a refurbishment of the building in 2016. And we will not get a product at the end of it that is fit for purpose, certainly not for the longevity. So I do take issue with people not actually taking on board the views of the people that have been consulted, and that includes those within the town centre and the users of the Falkirk Town Hall. And indeed, having looked at the Falkirk Herald comments, obviously I'm looking at a different thread from Councillor Bissett, because there is quite a lot of negativity in relation to the proposal where it now is, and just the fact that there's a further delay in seeing any actions in the town centre. However, in saying that, the bid have done a tremendous amount of work. They do have a business plan, and they will look to continue even through some challenging times that are to come, particularly over the next year or so, to support our businesses and keep as many going as possible, and actually look to encourage others to come in. But I do feel that our decisions perhaps giving them a problem that they're doing that with one hand tied behind their back. But I do wish them well and look forward to continue to work in the Town Centre Partnership and engaging with the traders over the coming weeks to try and give them a bit of confidence that we do still care about our town centre. On that, I will move to the next item.
19.1, please, Cecil.
That was just a wind up, Lynn, for the item.
However, you did mention me in your report, and I have a right to respond.
Oh, well, you have a right to raise a 19.1. So if you raise your 19.1.
I did. On the question of the state of the actual Falkirk Town Hall, we were in it for a brief meeting, a blended meeting with officers 2 weeks ago. We stood on the stage, and it's perfectly apparent this is not a building which is anywhere near needing knocking down. And it is worth mentioning that every other single project for theatres within the UK right now is a refurbishment. The Bristol project is a theatre 200 years old. The Stockton project, which started at 4 million, actually went to 28 million, and
Lynn, that's not your 19.1.
Its reserves. I think
I'm sorry.
you're being public about the costs here. This is a huge waste.
That's not a 19.1.
That's not a 19.1, Lynn. And what I will do is I'll ask officers to provide you with the information on the fabric of the current town hall and all the detail in relation to the feedback from those that actually currently use the Falkirk Town Hall and their views of a new build project, and that will give you exactly what I'm saying in relation to that, and that's again what people feel are being totally ignored. Their views are being ignored in that respect. Okay, we will move on to the next item, which is item 9, and it's community choices. And is that with yourself, Stuart?
It is indeed. Thank you, convener. So this report comes at the end of phase 1 of community choices, and just a reminder for members that phase 1 ran from February to July of this year. The team are just in the process of pulling together a summary report on phase 1, and that will be available in the next week or so for communities and members. Phase 1 covered small grants and the place-based capital programme allocations. We've undertaken a review at the end of phase 1. We held interviews with community groups. We held a focus group with members of the advisory panel, and we undertook an online survey with applicants and elected members, and the outcome of that feedback is set out in the appendix to the report before members today. The feedback from that process is reflected in the 3 recommendations that sit before elected members this morning. The first recommendation centres around the creation of a council-wide category. So as members are aware, phase 1 was based on projects within each of the 9 wards. One of the pieces of feedback that we got was that for those organisations that stretch beyond ward boundaries, there was no opportunity for votes to be cast and for awards to be made. So the first recommendation that we make based on our feedback is that we create a 10th category, which is a council-wide category for projects. The second recommendation follows on from that, which is that in order to find some funding for that 10th category, we need to take some money from the other 9 wards that have been indicatively allocated some sums. So that's the second recommendation, is that the pot of £200,000 for a council-wide category is taken from sums from the 9 wards with the indicative allocation. And the third recommendation is that we limit any application to 60% of the total ward allocation, and that's just based on experience of some projects that came in, whereas they'd been successful, they would have swallowed up in a single project the total funds available to any particular ward. So our third recommendation is to put a limit in place of 60% of a total ward allocation. Phase 2 convener is due to start shortly in the next couple of weeks or so, and that'll last through to February of next year. We've mentioned in the report on a number of occasions the fact that this has been a pilot. Clearly there are a lot of learnings and lessons learned for us as a result of the work that we have undertaken. Worthwhile, I think, just commenting on the fact that we have undertaken this during a period of the pandemic where face-to-face discussions hasn't been possible, so that's been a barrier for us. So it's really had to be held online. So lessons learned, I think, for us, but the 3 main lessons learned from the feedback are set out in the recommendations before members in section 2 of the report. I'm happy to answer questions that members have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. This was a difficult one to whether to introduce it during a pandemic or not, but we felt it was important to galvanise the great amount of goodwill and citizenship that evolved during the pandemic, and make available that funding for communities to be able to look at doing things for themselves. That there was a demand out there anyway, and we know that from the work that was done around the community asset transfer work, and this augmented a lot of that. And we are in a learning curve, and I think it was always going to be something that was never going to be perfect to begin with, but you know, it will have to be tweaked and amended as we go forward, and this is one of those particular occasions, because I think that we may well still have further changes as it develops further going forward. I think it was good that we got as much interest in the various grants in the first place, and the feedback has been really invaluable from those that have participated going through it, and will help us to build that support network around others. I think I know that certainly from my own ward area, there was a confusion and disappointment at the outcome of the voting, because projects didn't meet the threshold because of the whole council voting, and that wasn't clear until we went through that process. So I'm happy to support the recommendation around the Falkirk wide project category, and I think that will help organisations that cover not just one electoral ward but perhaps sections of wider communities across the council district, and recognising that the pot of funds needs to be adjusted in order to be able to do that. There is also the risk, as you've said, of large projects coming in and eating up all of the funding, and therefore some of the other projects not being able to develop and be taken forward within communities. Therefore, encouraging people to go and seek some matched funding and from other funding sources, and I think that's again something that we would want to support organisations with, or perhaps through our partnership work with CVS to be able to do that, so that it's not a detriment to a project happening. However, I'm going to leave it kind of open to discussions on that particular recommendation around the limit, to get people's views on whether 60% is the right level or not. I note in the recommendations the views of those that were consulted. There was a very small margin between 50% and 60%, but I would want to just maybe take views from the committee on that particular recommendation. But other than that, I think it has been a hugely positive exercise in engagement with our community to get community choices up and running. It's part of our participatory budgeting programme, and it's one that we look to continue to evolve going forward, and it fits very nicely with our empowering communities agenda. So I'm happy to move recommendation 1 and 2, but to hear what members have to say around recommendation 3.
Convener, I'm happy to. Community Choices has, apart from offering a vehicle for small grants and place-based capital programmes, has increased community involvement and engagement across the 9 wards of Falkirk Council. Community organisations now have a vehicle in Community Choices to promote their organisation, get better known in their communities, and have the opportunity to fundraise. Community Choices can only grow from strength to strength. I'm happy to second the proposals as outlined in the recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. Convener, as has been said, Community Choices, it's a credit to all the community groups that have bid into phase 1 of the Community Choices programme. Phase 1 delivered funding to many great projects, and thanks to officers for getting the Community Choices up and running, as you said, during the pandemic, and getting the awards made with a robust system in place for the governance and the auditing of this public money as well. I think I would rather, I would like to ask some questions about the Falkirk wide project. Stuart, can you give me an example of this? Because I don't know, is it things like if the Boys Brigade wanted something for all of Falkirk district, or is it something different? I couldn't get my head around what the different issues were, because I had conflicting thoughts, because obviously some of the smaller towns and areas that I not recommend. Anyway, Earth and Carnshore and places like that, it was smaller, specifically area-wide things that they were looking for, and I'm not sure that they would benefit from things that covered the whole area. Can you give me an example of anybody that may have been disadvantaged by the ward-wide allocation?
Through you, Convener, I mean, you've given a very good example yourself, Councillor Coombs. So, you know, the types of groups would be dance groups, where they're based in a particular area, but actually draw their membership from across the council area, Sea Cadets, Scouts, rugby clubs, so kind of organisations like that, but not exclusive to that particular grouping. But I'm sure all members on the call will know of organisations in their area that not only do work within their area, but do work that crosses a number of ward boundaries in the work that they do.
I was also a bit concerned about the level of the responses that were the questions that were asked, if I'm understanding this correctly, only to groups who had applied for and won funding, or was everybody that applied asked these questions about moving forward on to phase 2?
Yeah, everyone who applied was asked to provide feedback through the survey, and we also had the focus group with the advisory panel as well.
So how many groups was that? I mean, well, basically, I just think that we're looking at a survey here that only had 32 responses. A big percentage of a low input, it's difficult to base decisions on that. How many people how many groups were asked for feedback?
Well, all of the groups who were involved in the process were asked for feedback. So there were just over 110 expressions of interest, between expressions of interest for small grants and expressions of interest for the capital programme funding.
Okay, so of 110 were asked, 32 responded. That was the number I was trying to get as to how many were actually asked. As I said, would it be the right time to have a recess? Because as the convener says, the third recommendation was to limit the application at 60% of awards total allocation, and as you've said, Cecil, whether it's 50 or 60%, I'm not altogether sure. And since Councillor Bissett isn't here at the moment, I would like to have a quick 5-minute recess with the group, just to find, come to a conclusion on the decisions made. Would that be okay with the rest of the committee? Or I don't know if you want to speak to the Conservative group first of all and see if they've got any thoughts.
Okay, I'll go. Councillor Kerr, are you there? James? Or perhaps, oh, Nigel, sorry, you've got your hand up. Thanks.
Thanks, convener. Sorry, I know James is on the call, but clearly we're having a bit of problems, so a recess might help. Having called for a recess, I think my only observation and the only query that came up amongst in our discussion on this was, and you've answered the question already, and that was that what's set down here is not what might happen the next time round. In other words, an ongoing review, and I think that in essence satisfies questions we had around this issue.
Okay, thank
Happy
you,
to
Nigel.
take the recess if you wish, and hopefully we can try and get James on.
Okay, I'm happy if we maybe take a 10-minute recess, and that'll allow people to perhaps go and refresh themselves at the same time.
Okay, thanks, convener.
Joan, having had an opportunity, do you want to come back?
Yep, thanks, Cecil. Yeah, as I said, it's a great programme and we're glad for all the groups that benefited by it. But I think there's also an awareness that a lot of groups didn't know about it. So I think that we've incorporated that. We do have an amendment and hopefully everybody will be able to agree to it. Just before I give the amendment, I also want to say that although the community choice is a good thing and groups are benefiting by it, I personally think that the requirement of councils to give 1% of their budget to be decided by local groups, it's in a way, it's like we're cutting lots of services because our budgets are being cut, but we'll throw you a tuppence worth. It reminds me of when we used to do scrambles at a wedding. It's like, well, you're not invited to the wedding here and you're not getting the services that you're used to, but watch, you can catch some of the coins as we throw them out at the scramble. And this is what I think the community choice is it's throwing a pittance to communities that are being unfairly treated because of the cut in budgets. However, as I've said, we are legally required to do this, and what's I suppose little's better than nothing. For the amendment, we would like to propose that we do agree with part 1 and part 2, but I think it's important that for the creation of the Falkirk wide category within the capital programme, we need to make sure that it is something that benefits groups across the area, as was defined by Mr. Ritchie earlier, and not that there is, I don't know, a statue built in one particular area up in the Braes that's important to them, and they say, well, everybody else can come and see it. Something along those lines. I think we need to be really quite careful that every area can see and feel the benefit of whatever this Falkirk wide funding is, given that they are taking 10% out of their own individual areas' needs to put into this communal pot, of however you want to say it. So I'm not sure if we need to define that at the moment, or if that's something that Stuart can take on board.
I think it's something that perhaps Stuart and the group can take on board and define. What you're saying is I don't disagree with. It needs to be seen to be able to have touched all the communities, or that wider community, and it may well be, you know, that they're delivering some kind of activity or whatever that isn't limited to only one area or whatever, something like that, so that everybody has the same opportunity to be part of that. But I think
that's, I mean, something like if they wanted a minibus and it was based in Bonnybridge, but the people of Larbert and Stenhousemuir could also use it. So is that something that's easy enough to define within the parameters of the category, Stuart?
Yeah, through you, convener, that fits well with one of the things that we're going to do, because we need to redefine a lot of what was in phase 1, just to tighten it up and make things a bit clearer for community organisations. So that fits in well with the fact that we need to be a bit tighter in the specification that we have got for community choices. And as we did in phase 1, when we're sending the information out, in phase 2, we'll be giving elected members a copy of the documents that go out for their awareness and for them to use their own contacts within their communities to make sure that the message gets spread as wide and as deep as possible.
Okay, that's fine. That's, as I say, that was just the preamble to that one. So we agree with item 1 and 2. For item 3, to limit the applications, we would prefer that this was limited to 50% of a total allocation. And again, for the same reasons, so that the spread can be put out to other smaller groups, because a lot of the time it is the smaller committees that might not be as vociferous and may not have the wherewithal to leaflet or use public media to get support for their groups, but that doesn't make them any less important to the communities that they serve. So we would suggest that that was limited to 50% of the ward's total allocation for any one group. And we would add a fourth category, that phase 2 isn't implemented until there's been full public consultation. And that goes back to my comments earlier about the fact that we're basing decisions here on just 30 people out of the population of Falkirk, which is obviously hundreds of thousands. So I think that we need to be, Stuart just said it there just now, about reaching other groups, but I think that that is really important, that we have more people involved, more consultation, more public awareness of what's going on. Now, I don't want to stop the thing going on, but I think if we start right now to shout about this and let people know that community choice options are out there and that phase 2 is coming, but I do think that it's a small cohort of people and of groups within our communities that were aware of this and that were able to benefit by it.
Thank you. Just on the back of that, I've got a couple of questions for Stuart. Firstly, the implications for the programme and being able to deliver on what we said we were going to deliver within this year. Full public consultation, what's the impact on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to be clear that phase 2 is essentially start again. So it's start again in terms of trying to get our message out as widely and as deeply as possible. So we're not going back to only the same organisations. We're starting again to try and get as wide and as deep a sense of engagement as possible on this. So we've got £2 million of new money, if you like, to spend, and there's maybe about £250,000 that wasn't used in phase 1. We've maybe got about £2.2 million to spend in the new year, if I can call it that, and that's 2.2 million of new money that needs to be spent, as I've said before, as widely and deeply as possible. So the consultation is a start again, if you like, as part of phase 2, not just going to the same organisations again, if that helps.
Yeah, it does. And again, because the groups that were contacted to see if they wanted flowers for their communities were only the groups that got the ones when Kinneil was closed, and that kind of concerned me. And so I'm glad to hear that it's not just you're already in the gang, so you're further in the gang, and that is my main concern. So if you're saying that phase 2 is, as you've just said, completely start again and go out and contact as many people as possible, then I don't think we need that in our amendment. I'm looking here for hopefully speaking on behalf of the group, if I can get nods. Okay. Right, well, in that case, as I say, with that proviso, then we'll just go back to the original 3. We accept 1 and 2, but we'd like to change 3 to 50% of the allocation rather than 60 going to any one project. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thanks. I've got a further question around the 50%, and I'm thinking of some of the smaller groups or some of the smaller organisations, and maybe some of the smaller bids, and at 50%, are they like to be more likely disadvantaged than the larger groups. That may be a perception, I don't know, but I'm just looking to get a measure on that.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to know just what the difference would be between 50 and 60% on this. And to a certain extent, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer on whether it's 50 or 60%. I think probably the more important point is the principle of establishing a limit at which any single bid could use the sum that's been allocated to a particular ward. So based on community feedback, we have suggested that that could be 60%, but the reality is that in practice there's probably not going to be much difference between 50 and 60%. It's more about the principle, I would suggest.
Okay, thank you for that, Stuart. I will open it up for members' comments now. Are any other questions? Councillor Black?
Just in case it's needed, I'm happy to second Councillor Coombs' amendment, but I don't know if maybe there's a need for that, if there's going to be consensus, but I'll come in later if necessary.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Harris?
Thanks, Convener. I'm listening and take Stuart's view on the fact that will there be a difference between the 50 and the 60%? And I think my personal view would be that it is a matter of the principle. So I think from our group's point of view that we would accept either the 50 or the 60.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Councillor Bowes?
Thank you, Convener. I think we're very close on this. I think we're talking, I think Stuart has said about little differences. My understanding is that the communities were wanting actually a higher number than 60. I think it was touched on earlier on about how there'll be flexibility as we go forward and things will go to be reviewed. I would be more comfortable sitting at the 60, and where we go from there will reflect on what bids and that come into it this time. So I'm quite happy staying at the 60% as per the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowes. Anyone else?
Convener?
Councillor Nimmo?
Yeah, just a quick point, Convener. I wonder if Stuart could maybe elaborate a bit as to how they arrived at the 60% figure.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. So the 60%, I think, comes from feedback from our communities that they would like to see a limit put on the maximum that can be drawn down from any ward. The 60% comes from just discussions that we've had with other councils on how they've gone about trying to just deal with kind of governance arrangements around PB stroke community choices. I mean, it's difficult to say what the difference will be between 50% and 60% because we don't know what the applications are going to be that comes in from organisations. I suppose I'll go back to what I said in my introductory remarks, that we've started off with this as a pilot and we've got some lessons learned. We'll continue to review what it is that we do on an ongoing basis, come back to elected members and ask for the shape of that to be changed, you know, as and when required, that reflects the comments that are coming back from those that are involved in the process.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Alison, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it might not sound a lot, the 60 or 50%, but I know in the last tranche there was quite a lot of smaller groups that didn't benefit in any way, and some of the other groups put in big bids, and they got, they got quite significant amounts. So for me, that 10% might mean quite a lot to somebody. I think it's really important that we go ahead with this quickly. It's been a great success. But I think that taking 100k out of the budget this year for a Falkirk-wide project and 200k next year, that's really significant. And I think that Stuart's explanation really helped with that. I was grateful for that, because you can see the benefit, like the cadets or the boys brigade, etc., or a dance troupe, that people from all over the district, you can see how that would benefit. So I'm happy about that explanation. And I'm glad that going forward at the end that we're going to have a full consultation before the next tranche, because I do think that there are smaller groups that might benefit if they just maybe got a wee bit more support to fill in the applications, and maybe some of the groups that have experienced success this time could actually help those groups next time. So with that, I'm happy to stick with the 50% as stated by Councillor Coombs. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Black. I still have reservations, particularly for the smaller groups and the smaller projects, and at the 50%, as I think that they're going to be adversely affected, and it might be more challenging for them to find the matched funding that's needed compared to the larger sort of whole council groups that maybe have a wee bit more of a backing as well. So I'm more of a tendency to go for the 60%, and I'm happy to be proved wrong at the other side if that's not the case, but I'm really concerned just about some of the smaller groups, that they could be disadvantaged and the projects not be able to go ahead, and favouring some of the larger projects. I'll let you come back, Councillor Coombs, before we move to the vote.
What you're saying, and it's like we're both saying the same things but arguing for a different number, which I'm trying to get my head around. I thought that if anybody was limited to no more than half the available funds, then that would enable the smaller groups with less backings to be allocated some of the funds, which is why I was suggesting that we did the 50%. But you seem to be saying that same argument would hinder smaller groups from getting money if one big organisation got 60%.
Okay, I'll try and maybe explain my reasoning, and hope I can do that clearly. If, for example, a large project came in, remembering that there's still a limited pot for each of the wards, and a large project came in and, for example, soaked up 80% of the funding, because that was 50% of what they needed, and left only a small amount for all the other projects that were there. And if then 50% of a smaller project meant that smaller project wasn't able to go ahead because they weren't able to access any or the same levels of matched funding as some of the other ones, because it's a small community group, as opposed to a larger organisation that maybe had access to other funds, then that they could be disadvantaged. And I know it's a very small margin, but that's my thinking.
Can I just ask Stuart for clarification, because what you seem to be saying is that if they came in and asked for 50 or 60% of their total project budget, but my understanding is that it's 50 or 60% of the total area funding. Stuart, am I missing something? Is that? I understand what you're saying. If it's a big organisation, they want a big total of money, but it's not the percentage of their ask, it's the percentage of the whole pot of money. Stuart,
do you want to maybe clarify that?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I guess it could be both, actually, depending on what the nature of their bid is. So what we are suggesting is that we put a limit that no bid can take more than 60% of the sum available in any ward, or indeed that 10th category of a council-wide fund. What percentage that is of the organisation's project, I guess we don't know, because they could be looking for match funding, you know, of an equivalent sum. But the recommendation that we have is that for the limited sums that are available for each ward, no organisation or project should be able to get more than 60% of the sum available.
Okay, yeah. So people's perception, I think, is important, and I think to get more people involved, if no one group was allocated more than half the money in that whole area, it means that the other half is available for other people. And again, as I say, it's the perception. It's like, well, they got more than half the money for our whole area, might be the argument. And that's why I thought the 50% of the total sum available should not go to one group.
Okay, thank you, Joan. James?
Thanks, Cecil. See, regarding it's learn as we go, could it be that, say, for number's sake, 60% for the next one, to see how that affects the groups? And if we think that it needs to go down to 50% after that, you can put it down to 50% after that. But putting it at 50%, then putting it up to 60, the people who are getting 50% is this next one, that maybe harm them a lot more than 60%.
Yeah, that is an option to try and see how this pans out on this occasion with the groups and the bids that come in. And you're absolutely right, James. It's probably easier to go down the way rather than up the way, and people feel disadvantaged as well. So let's say there isn't really a right and wrong answer here. It's just individuals' perceptions. But I think we've got two proposals, one at 60% and one at 50%. And we'll just go to a vote. Okay, Colin?
Yes, thank you, Convener. The motion consists of the recommendations moved by you and seconded by Councillor Hughes, against which there is an amendment to substitute 50% or 60% in the third aspect of the recommendations, moved by Councillor Coombs and seconded by Councillor Black. Councillor Alexander.
On motion.
My apologies, Councillor Alexander. My sound was turned down. I wonder if you could indicate again.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coombs.
Amendment.
Councillor Harris.
I'll go for the motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Motion.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
For the motion.
Councillor Munro. Sorry, Councillor Munro, I think you were still on mute.
The motion.
Thank you. And Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
There were 7 votes for the motion, 3 for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, colleagues, for allowing that discussions to take place. We'll bring in Councillor Garner and Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. That's me back.
Okay, we're just trying to contact Councillor Bissett. Okay, while Jack is trying to make contact with Councillor Bissett, oh, he's appeared, that's great. Okay, item 10 is Denny Town Centre Regeneration Update Report, and I'll go to Mr Duff to present the report.
Thanks, Convener. So this report gives an update on the work taking place on Denny Town Centre regeneration, including the outcome of a recent marketing exercise that's taken place for the Phase 2 site in the scheme. And we're asking to agree to the disposal of the site to a company called Magnus Beresford, a developer who would proceed to develop a 7,500 square foot co-op retail unit to allow the expansion onto that site, as well as leaving a possible location for a possible community leisure facility. We suggest the price of that acquisition should be £100,000. The report gives an update on the work that's taking place on Derry Town Centre. Members will be familiar with the quite extensive work that was done some years back to demolish the former buildings at the Church Walk and to put in place the first phase of the scheme there with the new retail units and the library associated. Subsequently, we've been pursuing the regeneration of the Phase 3 site and the proposal for a new post office and convenience store coming forward there. We have been marketing the Phase 2 site and engaged a company, Sign Properties, in order to undertake that work. And they received 2 expressions of interest, one from a social housing developer and the other latterly received from the co-op looking to develop a new format store on the site to replace their ageing store in Stirling Road. And what we do recognise is that in the course of this work we have been pursuing the strategic property review. There is interest in the development of a new leisure facility that would serve the Denny and Banknock area, and therefore that we should do some options appraisal work to assess how that might be pursued to serve the community longer term. So in the course of this work, we marketed the site at Phase 2 to seek expressions of interest, but we allowed that a site for the community leisure facility would be retained. Following that marketing, we received an offer from Magnus Beresford to acquire the site at £100,000, as mentioned, for the delivery of that new co-op retail unit. And there's details of the unit in the appendix showing the proposed scheme and perspectives of the development. We've consulted with District Valuer and they've confirmed that this proposed sale would represent best value for us. I've also spoken with our planning team and they're content with the mix of proposals that would be proposed, the food store and the possibility of a community leisure facility if that's proven to benefit through the options work. And we also note that a co-ops developer would create a small community garden that would allow our equipment for digital display in the gable of Phase 1 to be retained. There has been quite extensive consultation with the Denny community over the course of this work, and there will be further consultation if the developer proceeds to submit for planning approval for the development of the Phase 2 site. We note the various risks associated with this, including that the capital receipt would help with delivery of the capital programme. And therefore, in conclusion, we are recommending that the Council should accept the interest that has been expressed by Magnus Beresford for delivery of the new co-op unit at a price of £100,000 for our site, and that we should proceed with the work on the business case and options appraisal for the community leisure facility. I'm happy to take any questions, and Colin Frame from our economic development team has joined, who's been involved in undertaking the marketing work for this site.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. I'll go to Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener, and thanks to Douglas for running through the report. Progress in town centres are not words we've heard in recent times, but as always a welcome investment in our town, and if this means the regeneration of the town centre can take a step forward, all the better. In relation to the recommendations in the co-op looking to move across the street in a modern, more suitable site, yes, I see some benefits. But the real game changer for me, and indeed the community, if the social media response is anything to go by, and I heard Councillor Bissett mention that earlier, and just when I was out the last night and there, I looked in and there's 200 positive comments and 1 negative comment that I can find in relation to this. So that's quite an overwhelming vote of confidence from the community. The possible new state-of-the-art community leisure facility, that's what we're talking about here in part of the recommendations. This is required more than ever given the growth within our ward and would be the final piece of the regeneration our town needs, and it would increase footfall, provide an even and nighttime economy, whilst improving residents' health, well-being and providing a community facility. This would benefit all ages, and given the response to a recent social media post, which I mentioned, and my ward colleague, Councillor Colley, that this has the support of the vast majority of our constituents. A quote from my colleague who also supports these recommendations: "I'm very pleased to see a proposal to set aside land for community leisure facility in Denny Town Centre. There's a real lack of provision and people in the area want and need quality local provision for their own health and well-being. Moving forward, to develop such a facility would be an investment in the people of the area, working to improve physical and mental health for residents, a vision I'm sure we'll all share, hopefully we all share. With this in mind, Convener, and looking to progress things, I have an amendment. I'd like to add a recommendation, and that is, it would be recommendation 3, and it would be agrees the £100,000 generated from the sale of the land will be allocated towards funding a community leisure facility as above, if appraisal results are positive, and directs the service to undertake the options appraisal and business case as soon as is practically possible. I think that's it, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. I'm happy to second the report with the amendment. I think having this interest by the cooperative to relocate and coupling with the desire to look to using leisure and recreation as part of the repurposing of town centres fits very well with policy initiatives. And while there's some work to do to be able to establish the feasibility and in fact including the need within the area, I think it's right to look to do that. As we know, all town centres are changing, even our smaller town centres, and by creating an activity within the town centres, it will improve the footfall going forward, and therefore the economic stability of the Denny Town Centre in this. So as I say, I'm happy to second the report, and I have a hand up from Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. I was going to mention how we had arrived at the land cost, and the report doesn't make clear how much land it actually includes. It just gives a cost, which is very modest, given that the most small house plot today would cost in the order of 100,000. But given Councillor Gardner's comments saying it ought to be donated to the community, surely this creates a precedent, and were a similar occurrence to happen in some other community, would this still be the case, or are we talking a one-off?
I'll go to Mr. Duff, but I think that there already has been a precedent for allocation of funds, and I'm sure he'll be happy to explain how the price for the piece of land has been agreed.
The price for the land is based on the marketing exercise that has been undertaken. So, you know, I hear Councillor Munro in relation to the value of land in different locations, but that can be for different purposes, and it's very much down to market circumstances. We have marketed this site, we have received an offer, The developer has proposed 100,000 for that use. They will have factored that into their appraisal for the delivery of this scheme. The district valuer has confirmed that that is offering the best value to us, and therefore that establishes the market price. It's perhaps an indication of the market for this type of development at this point in time, but that is the value that is now perceived in the market and is the way forward for completion of the scheme. In relation to ring fencing, I think as convener is saying, that it's not without precedent, although Mr Smale might have some comment about the implications this would have for the capital programme if this is extended to this site.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Brian, do you wish to come in just now, or do you want to come in later?
Convener, it's maybe helpful to come in on the back of your invite and Mr Duff's comments. I think the only observation I would make, and I don't think it will come as any surprise, is that the earmarking of the capital receipt for a particular project is not a problem in any way. My only concern would be a possible interpretation that by so doing, it's indicating this project will progress, and that both brings into play the interface with the due process for the capital programme, and indeed if it intrudes on budget considerations, would, I think, be one that requires council consideration. So I think the subtle distinction there, and it's an important one, is between allocating a capital receipt towards a project should it progress, which is fine, as opposed to a interpretation that agreeing to the proposition as it's currently framed is effectively authorising a particular project with presumably significant capital costs and indeed revenue costs attached to it to progress. So that would be the lens I would be looking at this through, and that subtle but important difference, and just so that the committee understands what it's potentially signing up to. Hopefully that's helpful, or at least of clarification, convener. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to bring in Mr Moody on that to just maybe help the clarification, because I think we do need to make it clear that my understanding as Councillor Gardner is not being presumptuous and that the project will go ahead, but it's about the feasibility, and if the feasibility is favourable, then that would be the next stage. But I'll ask Mr Moody to come in.
Yes, thank you, convener. And firstly, it's to confirm that yes, there is precedent for the allocation of receipts, capital receipts to a particular project, and members of the executive may recall their own decision in February 2019, I think, in relation to the gateway receipts and the allocation of those receipts to town centre regeneration. On the very particular point that Mr Smale raises on does this offend against the council's role in terms of the allocation of the capital programme, I think in my view the answer to that is no, and I think it's reflected in the fact that Councillor Garner's additional recommendation makes it clear that it's if the appraisal results are positive, then this sum, if the recommendation is accepted, would be allocated to that project, but it doesn't presume that the project itself will proceed. That will still be part of the allocation process in the normal budget round.
Okay, I think that's perhaps helpful. I've got Councillor Harris and Councillor Bissett. I'll come back to you to wind up at the end, Councillor Garner.
It was just for a point of information for Councillor Munro to say that the information she was looking for was in the report at 4.6, if you had read that.
Okay, and Councillor Harris.
Thanks, convener. I welcome this paper. The completion of the regeneration of the Denny Town Centre has been taking quite a while. As we've heard, there's been several attempts at disposing of the last of the gap sites, which is one of the most visible, certainly as you come in from the Stirling end of Denny. So welcome the disposal of the site for the development of the co-op store. There's no question that the provision of leisure facilities within the town centre is high of importance amongst residents of Denny. And I think that by giving a commitment that we will do an appraisal on this, and if favourable, then after going through the due business process, then as we've heard, an application could be made for capital funding for that. But I think that the notional allocation of the capital receipts from the site does give a commitment to the community that if the appraisal is favourable and the capital, the business case is also favourable, then we're giving a commitment that this is the direction that we're going on in to complete the regeneration of the Denny Town Centre. So I'm very much supportive of this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, convener. I might call for a short recess just for the group to discuss Councillor Gardner's amendment, but if that could be circulated to the group members. But first of all, I'd just like to say we welcome this. You know, it's building on the original proposals that we put forward for phase one, and I'm glad that it's going forward, and we'll see this regeneration taking place in Denny. It's long overdue, and I know the people of Denny are going to welcome this. And certainly regarding leisure, if that's something, as long as we do the appraisal, and if it's what the people feel is really needed there, well, let's go for it. So happy with the recommendations, but we'd just like a wee short 2 or 3 minutes just to speak to the group around Councillor Gardner's amendment, if you don't mind.
Okay, Councillor Coombs, you've put your hand up.
Sorry, thanks. Just before we go into recess, can I ask, it probably be Brian, about specifically ring fencing the capital here for a leisure centre in Denny? Would that impact on, I'm just thinking in general terms, would it not be better done within the context of the strategic property review when we're looking at the whole area? I just don't understand how this taking it out and putting it aside when we are doing a strategic property review rather than an individual area. Would that be Brian, or I don't know who could tell me?
I think it might be Douglas that would maybe be able to respond to that.
I think, as Brian's saying, it all needs to be seen in the context of the capital programme. It all comes back to the council's finances and what's possible to deliver. So the strategic property review is seen in the context of that programme. It's the resource that would be looked to support its delivery. So it probably, would need to be seen in that context.
Sure, I'm any the wiser, but the 100, that's what I'm saying. It's like when we're selling off other properties, it's all going into a general council-wide fund to then see what communities would be benefiting by the general fund. but what we're saying here is this specific fund is kept for this specific project.
Yeah, and so the general approach to this is to rely on the capital programme and the decisions at council to determine what projects the council wants to invest in. But there have been instances, as we've heard, where specific measures to ring fence to enable a project's delivery are put in place. And so you're right, in the number of instances around the property review, we've done that. The HQ, dare I say it, has that provision with the ring fencing of receipts from the municipal building site as a prospect for investment there. And we have heard about the gateway situation, which would help with town centre regeneration. It is members' call as to whether they want to do that, but it does have an impact on the flexibility that would be achieved overall for the capital programme that then falls to the council to determine.
Okay, all right. Thanks, convener.
Okay, if it was 5-10 minutes be adequate in Councillor Bissett?
That'd be fine, convener. If the amendment could be circulated, please.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Nimmo's got his hand up. I presume a question.
It was just a quick question before we go into recess as well. It's for Douglas. Douglas, just as far as the proposals for any new leisure facilities in Denny are concerned, has there been any interest from private companies to set up either a private gym or any other leisure facilities in the area? Is it a viable option for them?
We have asked. I'll maybe bring Colin in. He's been closer to this in terms of the work that was undertaken with our agents to determine if there was interest. We did ask that question. And we've not seen anything come forward, but Colin, you can maybe say a bit more about the work that was done there.
Yeah, so we did market the site. Our agents, Donald Syme, marketed the site and sent the details out to all potential operators, gym and leisure operators, and also the various agents throughout the UK to see if there was any private sector interest in a proposed leisure development on this site, and there was no interest came back.
Right, so there's no interest from private companies. So my second question tagged on to that is, what makes you think that a council-run facility would actually be cost effective?
And I think that's the work that we're asking to be done.
Yeah, through you, convener, it is a recommendation in the SPR implementation plan that an exercise is undertaken to consider the provision of that facility. It recognises the growth that's taken place in that area and the difficulties that are experienced with the range of accommodation in the western locality of the council's area. That's based on the review that took place on the properties. So it is one of the recommendations in the implementation plan, but it very much is down to preparing a business case and assessing the options for its delivery, and that's the exercise we're suggesting is taken forward from today.
Okay, thanks, convener. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, 10 minutes, Councillor Bissett.
That will be fine, convener. Thank you.
Okay.
Customer journey, and the fourth one is around hybrid and modern workplaces. Paragraph 4.2 of the report sets out the achievements of these 4 sub-projects to date, and these themes are continued in section 4.3 of the report, which looks at the future benefits of the project. We've appended to the report some case studies that set out the benefits of some of the work that's been undertaken. Case studies will be familiar to elected members. They've been to scrutiny committee before, and I think they've been to the executive previously before too. Section 4.10 of the report provides the milestone plan for the work that we're doing, sets out clear stepping stones to delivery of our objectives. Number of savings identified in the project, they're set out at 4.7 of the report, and we say in that section that as part of the next iteration of the business case, we're looking to increase the value of the savings being identified through the digital work that we are doing. The recommendations, convener, are set out in section 2 of the report. I'm happy to answer questions that members have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie, for this. This project has been one that has gained momentum, and particularly throughout the pandemic, the recognition to digitise our communities much more than they have been has become more and more acute. With the limited contact as a result. So there's been a huge amount of work put into trying to make contact with those that are digitally isolated, and provide with devices and support that will enable them to access services and support at various levels, whether that be at a low level or at a more strategic level that's needed around access to benefits, etc. At the same time, it has required us as a business to review how we engage with communities, and particularly digitally, and we have seen some very good examples of that over the last year, and there's been some really good engagement and the desire to continue in that particular mode. Resulting obviously in us having to look at our own infrastructure around digital and improve connectivity to Wi-Fi, and we've seen, you know, even our town centre Wi-Fi has become something that has been very welcomed, particularly to small businesses going forward. It is work in progress, and it's something that will continually need to be reviewed and changed, but has the potential to take us very much into a more modern way of working, and actually to be able to deliver services and support to our communities, and for them to be able to step up and provide support to themselves in a wide variety of ways. And that is where we are now. There is the ability there to make some efficiency savings going forward, and that is very welcome, but it has to be done within the context of actually recognising that's about service improvement and going forward. So I'm more than happy to support the recommendations in this report and see this transformation project going forward. It will put Falkirk very much at the forefront, as we were early on in the pandemic, and particularly with the work around our STEM in schools, our STET in schools, and the delivery of devices to our pupils, and giving them the best possible opportunities during what has been a very difficult time, but recognising that this is how things are going to progress in the future. So more than happy to support the recommendations as in section 2. And I'm looking to my colleague, Councillor Hughes. Yes. You're on mute, Councillor Hughes.
I'm afraid all my thunder has been stolen by the convener and Stuart Ritchie. There's not a lot one can actually say after listening to Cecil and Stuart, except to say that the Digital Communities Project, which is one of 6 ambitions set out in the digital strategy. This is a wide-ranging project with 4 sub-projects. I won't go over or reiterate the 4 projects, but just basically to take from the report itself, the project is intended to be transformational, enabling communities to be online and to have increased and improved access to online service delivery. It will also enable our staff to deliver their jobs in a mobile and flexible way. It is a work in progress, but I believe it's a good project. it is ambitious, and it will increase connectivity. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, convener. I think we all recognise the goals of this project in terms of our digital ambition. The challenge is, are we still likely in some ways to have people who are unable to access this system through age or language difficulties or lack of a device? And I know we're trying to deal with those issues, but people phoning in the last 2 years have sometimes had great difficulty in even contacting ourselves as a council. So my question to Stuart would be, what will we still have the ability for people to come and meet face to face where they feel that is what they prefer? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. That's a very important point that Councillor Munro makes, and it's covered in one of the recommendations that sit in the report. So digital is about self-help for those who are able to self-help, which will free up officer time to support those who need our help. So there will always be officer time available for those who need our help in person. But to take away the volume of what we get, we're trying to introduce digital means and other means by which people who can self-help can self-help.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I'd just like to thank everybody involved in this project. The digital transformation has been quite phenomenal, really, and all credit to all the officers involved. There's been one lot of work to get to the stage, supporting pupils and employees, and certainly the Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow programme is moving at a pace. So it's really, I'm just really wanting to say, thanks to everybody for getting it to this stage, and Ian Whitelaw, who's passionate about the CCTV and the integration of that across Falkirk District, and connect it all up to the Foundry, and there'll be a screen there where it's monitored. I think we're beginning to pull this together, and it's been quite a significant project. So it is a work in progress, and it does take time, and I'm glad Mr. Ritchie addressed the point about those who may be excluded and like to go to a hub to pay their rates, and have a chat with people. So we've still got to consider these people. Not everybody likes going online. So just a good news story, and I'd like to thank everyone involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. Any other member? Okay, are we happy to agree the report?
Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, we now move into private session for the remaining items. So we'll just give a minute or two for the live stream to be stopped.